Okay, first of all, I've got some numbers to present and some estimates, a mixture of both, but it's drawing on two sets of research surveys that have been done. And in the first slide, I didn't point out, it's Professor John Smallwood and I that have actually sharing in this material. The first survey is the Construction Management Program survey, which is a program run at the University of Stellenbosch every year, a postgraduate short course for construction people. And I was surveying the delegates on their opinions of what's going on in industry every year between 2003 and 2011. It's, even if I say so myself, a significant database of information that takes us from bust to boom and back to bust again in terms of demand for construction. So we see what happens in the industry through each phase of that cycle. The second survey is one that's conducted quite recently in response to the Department of Higher Education's request that the SACPCMP advise on what are the needs going to be to satisfy the SIPS program in terms of our professions. And at very short notice, John Smallwood did a survey which he calls an indication survey, because it wasn't a very in-depth one. It was enough of a sample to give us an indication of what the needs are. So I'm going to go through those two. This is a list of what were the top-ranked problems seen by those attending the construction management program. These are middle managers from construction majors every year. So you'll see on the right-hand side, the 2003, what problems they saw and how they ranked them. Number one problem was lack of skills in other organizations. 2005, 2007, right up to 2011 shown here. And down the left-hand side, the problems. The ones that let's just have a look at the first couple. Number one, lack of skills in other organizations that we deal with. Number two, lack of continuity of work. Well, one would expect that in 2011 after we came off the boom leading up to 2010. Number three, constant late information and changes. Problems within the system of construction delivery that we have to tolerate. It's there every year, round about 3, 2. But that's not the topic for today. Number four was number of skilled people who are leaving the industry. Number of skilled people leaving the industry. A very sad fact that we'll be dealing with a little bit more tomorrow as well. And so on. I could go through that list, but you'll see those that are in this sort of yellow color, highlighted in yellow, they're all skills-related problems. Impact of AIDS and sickness, lack of own organization skills and capacity. And incidentally, that lack of our own organization skills and capacity in previous years has been number one and number two. So not only are they saying our own organization lacks skills, but so do all the others that we deal with. Few young people entering the industry. Number 12 in 2011, but it had been number 5 in 2005, and so on. You can see the ranking there. Lack of craftsmen, been as high as number 4, of course, in 2007 when the boom was really going, and number 6, problem number 6 in 2008. So, yeah, you can historically follow the facts, but every year the number one problem when we analyze this list, which actually goes to 50-odd items, I've only shown you the top few, it's always skill shortages. Boom or bust, the industry is always short of skills. It also contributes, of course, to that which is listed as number 7 in that table, high stress levels experienced by construction managers and project managers. And of course that in turn leads to the reason why people are leaving the industry, burnout. In 2012, a colleague at the University of Stellenbosch and myself prepared a paper for the Journal of Civil Engineering in UK. And we showed this model to describe how over time we'd seen a pattern of what was going on from, I mean, that table, the list of problems is only one of many questions in that survey. So what I've shown here is impact on construction markets on the left, impact on construction firms as a whole, and impact on project staff and the project at the bottom. And this is what we see. Government intervention, major impact on the firm in the first instance. It created new barriers to entry into construction markets, if you remember back to the introduction of new procurement methods. Government intervention also created much more demand flux, boom and bust. Demand flux impacts on skill shortages. Faults in the traditional delivery system, such as those drawings that are always coming late and late instructions and the drawings are wrong and so on. Faults in the traditional delivery system. So the new barriers to entry cause firms to change in terms of downsizing, closing, amalgamating, relocating and finding new markets and so on. That in turn had an impact on project staff, and in fact all of those interventions impacted on project staff. What was created in fact on projects we describe as an unsupportive environment. In fact, in many cases it's a toxic environment. It's so bad for people who are working there that they just can't take it and they buzz off. They get out of construction. We are really burdening our people at the workplace with layers and layers of new legislation, compliance. Yeah, you probably know more about it than I do. And that, of course, brings the stress that causes people to leave, adding to the skills shortage. And it's debatable that we may be losing as many people as we're gaining every year. We don't know because we haven't actually quantified that yet. We can see it's a very high factor in everybody's concerns every year at the CMP, but it wasn't actually quantified. So skill shortages becomes the number one problem. So whilst we knew what was happening, we didn't have the numbers. We knew people were leaving, but we just didn't have the numbers. So now let's come back to the SIPs, the 18 strategic integrated projects. We're trying to measure the skills that were needed. John conducted his indication survey in April this year. Was it John, I think? Yeah. And I might say that it was across all of the three professions within the SACPCMP. I'm only dealing with construction management today. It would take us all day to deal with all three. The question was asked, how many of each type of professional would you require to undertake a million rands worth of construction work? That's what the construction firms and project management practices were asked. And from that we were able to glean the fact that 6,400 construction managers would have been needed to undertake the work at the levels of 2013, which weren't great. And when I speak of construction managers, of course, they have all kinds of different titles in industry. Site managers, site agents, contract manager, contracts managers, and contracts directors. They're all demonstrating, utilizing construction management skills and should all be registered persons. And the mention of the registered persons is a flag, because we certainly don't have 6,400 registered persons at the moment. Leaving that aside for the moment, dealing with that number of construction managers, we of course know that there's attrition. So I took some, what I think are really conservative assumptions here, that there'd be annual losses, let's say 5% retire. It's probably much more than that because the age distribution is skewed towards people with white hair. The burnout factor, again, extremely conservative here. 2.5% upgrade to construction project management and other places, and let's say 2.5 decide to relocate for other reasons. So again, fairly conservative, but if we value that in terms of the figure we were given, that requires about 960 CM replacements every year. So how are we doing on the supply side? I'm looking first at graduates, B.Sc in construction management and B.Tech in construction management. We of course have got colleagues in related disciplines that we'll consider, but I'll come to that. There are 11 universities producing 158 construction management graduates per annum. It's been fairly steady at about that number. And in 2012, when I presented the results of the university survey of graduates, it was seen that the traditional universities, the 6 that had been producing B.Scs, actually were showing a declining the number of graduates, loss of interest in construction management amongst quite a few of the universities, whereas the newer technical universities were producing much more and keeping the overall number the same. But it looked like the technical universities were becoming the champions. And therein lies a major concern, and that's why the next speaker is going to talk and why we're going to have a panel discussion afterwards. What's going to happen to that B.Tech stream? Are we still going to have it around or not? Big concern. Abimbola Windapo, Dr. Abimbola Windapo was telling me from UCT yesterday that about 75% of UCT's CM graduates every year are recruited in their final year and they go to firms in Britain, Germany, and elsewhere in Europe. Our South African construction management product is in great demand overseas. So again, I'm being very conservative and say we lose 30 recruits to overseas firms. So that leaves us with a gap. We need 960 replacements per year, and we're getting 130 out of the system. And still they're only trainees, because they need another couple of years in industry to finish off their education and training. So the shortfall, 830 persons, where do they come from? Well, of course, we've got the national diploma in building. And construction studies at universities, at other universities, a 3-year exit point. Industry has said to us before, particularly at Summit 2012, we heard from Stocks and Stocks that they only want the 4th-year product. But that's not true of everyone, and perhaps we'll find out a bit more about that later. So I've got to assume here that a large part of that 500 national diploma graduates every year is filling that gap. But it may be that they're going to supervisory levels below construction management and then working their way up. And so there's probably always a churn factor as they work their way through the system. We don't know enough about that, and more research is needed, John. So even if we can say that those 500 are filling the gap, even if it's through churn, then we still have an overall shortfall of about 300. But I've shown you from the CMP survey that we always have a shortage. And we're asking our construction managers to operate out on a limb without support, with minimal support. That's why they're burning out. And bosses have got used to our construction managers behaving that way, so they say, carry on. And they're not recognizing that the branches are snapping. Back to that tomorrow. So who's filling the gap? Well, civil engineers. They claim the ground. They say they are the construction managers. And yes, they are in many cases. QS graduates our QS colleagues do a fair amount of, get a fair amount of management education in their degrees. So they're probably better equipped than engineers to move into that role. Again, we don't know the numbers. But certainly, I think you can see from what I've presented here that there's a gap that needs to be addressed. And I'm putting it this way. there's a case for quadrupling the number of B.Sc and B.Tech graduates. So we have a shortfall even before SIPS comes along. And John has calculated that in order to cope with a 25% increase over 2013 because of SIPS, and SIPS is promising to deliver much more than 25% increase in demand. But for 25%, we would require an extra 1,500 construction managers, like that. Where are we going to get them from? If it increases by 50%, we need 3,000 and so on. So there's a major challenge out there that I'm hoping the universities will rise to. Some more questions arise. Does industry really want the CMs? And why are they not driving this call that I'm putting to you now? Why has industry not put out there, we require more CMs? Where are they? What are they doing about it? Do they prefer a 3-year or 4-year degree? And are they playing their part in graduate training? Can universities deliver to meet the needs of SIPs? And yeah, it's not a question. Definitely there's a need for more research here. And again, over to universities. Alfred, perhaps this will help a little bit. An old friend of mine told me once, I've learned that pleasing everyone is impossible, but pissing them off is a piece of cake. Thank you very much.